following address was made by Dr. D. Elton Trueblood, founder of the Yokefellow Movement and president of Yokefellows International, on October the 10th, 1980, at the Genetti Lycoming Hotel in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. There were 150 Yokefellows from the central Pennsylvania area who had gathered to give Dr. Trueblood a tribute and to hear him again address them on the essence of the Yokefellow movement. 150 persons gave their tribute to him, and we received from him a grand and good interpretation of the meaning of Yokefellow. The recording was made on a very simple handheld cassette recorder, and so it is not of the same quality if it were done in a studio kind of reproduction, but you will hear the essence of Yokefellow described by Dr. Trueblood himself.
Day of the 10th month. The Chinese have a beautiful name for it, Double 10. They think this is the finest day of the year, and perhaps it is. With the leaves coming at their very best in color, and we've had this magnificent weather. I have looked forward to this morning immensely, and the fact that there would be more people than expected, this is a very thrilling thing indeed. I see the faces of people here whom I have known and greatly honored. Alton Mater, I must have known for more than 30 years. I think he was with me at Harrisburg when I spoke before the Pennsylvania Council of Churches long ago. And the lights went out. What do you suppose I did? I went right on because I didn't have any notes. That'll teach you not to use notes when you give a speech. One day a man decided that he ought to join church. So he went and found a pastor, and he said, "I'm ready to join the church." Well, the pastor said, "It isn't quite that easy. I've got to ask you a few questions. Where was Jesus born?" "Williamsport." "Oh," he said, "you won't quite do. You've got to study longer before you can become a member." So he went across the street and found another pastor. He said, "You've got to help me. I'm in a bind. Where was Jesus born?" "Bethlehem." "Oh, shucks," he said, "I knowed it was one of them Pennsylvania towns." I've got another joke for you that I think is new. One fellow was asked, "When did you start working here?" "When they threatened to fire me." Now, take down the jokes and use them now. You see, we need all the help we can get. Abraham Lincoln was asked why he laughed so much, and he said, "Because otherwise I would cry." So, thank God that when Christians gather, there is a great deal of laughter, and that's the way it ought to be. I have come not to entertain you, but to draw you into what I think is a genuine renewal of basic Christianity. We know that we cannot win with conventional religion. The terrible thing about a great deal of our religion today is that it doesn't make any difference We have 3 hymns and a sermon and a benediction and go home just the same people that we came. And this is not good enough. We've got to have something in which lives are changed, and because lives are changed, the world is changed. The movement to which you and I belong is an effort to produce the conditions under which changed lives will be the product. We have figured out that this is not done by any one thing, but always by a combination. I'm glad to see some of you taking notes. I hope you will. Some are taking it on tape. I want you to use this material with the people whom you reach. The 4 elements that we find that you have to have are commitment, fellowship, ministry, and discipline. And each of these helps the other. I was just talking with Gene Shore, whom we first knew when he was a prisoner at Allenwood, and who is now employed at Atlantic City, the most difficult mission field in North America. And he's very happy there. But he was pointing out to me how he had learned that these elements have to support one another. Is that right, Gene? First, commitment. What is a Christian? A Christian is any person of any race or nation and of either sex who is committed to Christ. Christ's great call was, "Come to me. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me." You get nowhere with religion in general. It isn't worth a thing. A commitment is, however, absolutely specific. It pleases me that the one book of the 31 that I've written that has reached more people than any other is the one called The Company of the Committed. And as I look at your faces, I know that that is exactly what you are. What does it mean to be committed? It means to find a center of your life. All around us there is confusion and perplexity and uncertainty. When Christ saw the crowds, he recognized that they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. And then he said, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few." That is, the human harvest is the harvest. And he is calling you not to be observers, not to be an audience, but fellow workers, all united in this one thing, that all are committed to him and his cause. Number 2 is fellowship. Get this very straight, dear friends. You cannot be a Christian alone. To be a Christian, you must either find or produce a fellowship of other unworthy people. It is where a few, this morning 140 are gathered together, that Christ is. Nearly all of the work of the New Testament is that of a team. And of course, the glorious thing about the yoke as a symbol is that it's the very symbol of teamwork. There is for us no single yoke. It has to be together. If you would be yoked with him, you have to be yoked with one another. Number 3 is discipline. Commitment, fellowship, discipline. The animal that wears the yoke is under a discipline. The ox is not free to wander wherever he likes to go. The yoke keeps him straight. And so the Christian has the discipline of daily prayer, daily scripture, regular worship, proportionate giving, and most practical of all, the discipline of time. How precious time is. It is God's gift. It is the one way in which all of you are equal. You are all equal before the clock. You may not be equal in your intelligence or your physical strength, but everyone has the same number of hours in every day. The question is how to use them. The founder of this great commonwealth said, time is what we want most, but what, alas, we use worse. And for this, God will hold us responsible when time shall be no more. William Penn wrote that in a very attractive little book called The Fruits of Solitude. You must have disciplined lives because empty freedom always fails. The role of the Christian is not to do what he happens to like, for he is under command. He is not his own. Do your own thing is probably the most vulgar statement of our century. It is one in which no Christian will ever engage. We seek not to do our own, but to follow one who is our master. And then there comes a marvelous freedom at the end. For the Christian, there is the freedom to love and live and work because it's under control. Number 4 is ministry. Every Christian is called to be a minister. Dr. Mosier here is in the ministry of medicine. Another here is in the ministry of banking. Many here are in the ministry of homemaking and of teaching, and on and on and on. There are as many ministries as there are persons. The day was, even in my boyhood, that people thought that minister and clergyman were synonymous. Everyone in this room knows that that is not true. The clergyman undoubtedly has a glorious ministry, that of helping other people with their ministries. But we know as yoke fellows with Christ that the non-ministering Christian is a contradiction in terms. But if you are to be a minister, as you must be, you have to learn. That's why you have to study. That's why you have to read. That's why you have to think. That's why you have to be in small groups to help one another, because no one can learn as much alone as he can with the support of other people. Never forget that when Christ made his clearest call to commitment, he included learning. Take my yoke upon you, he said, and learn of me. Dear friends, we are in a great work. We are trying to bring new spiritual vitality to our community, our nation, and our world. I have lived every day of the 20th century. I shall be 80 on December 12th. I belong to the 20th century. I thank God for the fact that in the 20th century, one of the greatest developments has been that of the lay ministry, which to many of us has been a fresh, new, and very ennobling concept. And I ask you not only to practice this, which I think you're now doing, but to bring this to as many people as you can. I want you to know that we are in a great work. I am delighted that we've been able to keep faith with you in regard to time. It's 8:28.
Thank you, Dr. Trueblood. We've all been renewed in our understanding of the Yokefellow cause and movement. Unavoidable, they were from the cafeteria room itself. Other groups were meeting adjacent to the room in which we were meeting. Also, there were noises that are common to a serving room of this kind, and so you'll just be understanding of that, I'm sure. Dr. Trueblood spoke and then answered questions from the various persons that were there, and I'm sure that you will enjoy again hearing Dr. Trueblood, because some of the remarks are somewhat different than on the first side of this cassette recording.
Is precious, and I do not propose to waste any of it. I want to get right to business. I'm so grateful to John Mosteller for what he has done. I flew in yesterday, coming from Dayton, changing in Pittsburgh, and as you might suppose, they didn't get my bed moved over from TWA to what was once Allegheny. And so I felt a little disappointed last night when I got to Williamsburg without any shaving equipment or anything of the kind. But God in His mercy has taken care of it, and the bag came at 11 last night, and I felt very happy about it. I want to say to any of you, unless you are willing to undertake things of that character, do not enter the traveling ministry. It will occur. We're very happy, Mrs. Mosteller, to have you here so we can say to the world that we have token integration. I'm so glad to think of the various groups represented. I'm especially impressed to have two bishops in the flesh right facing me here. I am so glad that Hal Owen can be here from Rising Sun, Maryland. He expects to drive me to Maryland this afternoon. I still don't know how he found this place. Was it by the grace of God?
Grace of God, yeah.
Now, John, I want to give a very high grade. Coming from Williamsport, I know he made at least 20 turns. Wouldn't you say so? And he never made a wrong turn. Now, you can't say that if you're
No.
One fellow was asked if he ever made a mistake. He thought very hard, and then he said, yes, once. I thought I was wrong and found out I wasn't.
That was Franklin Clark Broad.
Wasn't he some man?
Yeah.
Of course, I knew him very well and admired him a lot. I'll tell you a great joke about Fry. He decided to send his daughter to a Lutheran seminary. That was a very odd thing. Lutheran college, you understand. A very odd thing for him to do. He was certainly the best known Lutheran in North America. And when the girl went to register, the Dean of Women said, "What does your father do?" And that's the first time she'd ever had anybody ask that question. But the woman found out. And we still remember him with wonderful pleasure. Now, dear friends, we are in a great work. We know that it is on feeble shoulders like ours that much of the renewal of vital Christianity rests. I'm sorry that there aren't better instruments. But these are the instruments. For better or for worse, you are the person who can make a lot of difference. This, therefore, is not Operation Addition, but Operation Multiplication. Now, what do we need? We need to know, first of all, that we are in a bad situation. Realism is very important. I was just mentioning to our friend here how we are losing Sunday. Now, I don't think that Sunday is the whole of our faith, not a bit of it. But it's been a good thing. Haven't you been grateful for it? It has been one way in which we can break some of the aggressiveness of ordinary society for a little while. But last Sunday morning in Richmond, Indiana, where I live, the Kroger stores opened a great new place with great fanfare. After church Sunday morning, I drove by there about 11. There were at least 1,000 cars, and apparently they'd been there since 9:30. They assumed that the time to do this was Sunday morning. How do you like that? It means that in their opinion, at least, the number of people who would be in the places of public worship was a minimal number. Isn't that what they think? Hardly to be paid much attention to. Get it straight. Committed Christians in this country are a minority. You, sir, represent a minority movement. And to know that is a great thing. That doesn't mean we quit. It means we struggle harder, and it means we've got to have new and imaginative approaches. I'd like to tell you about an approach we're using to overcome some of the lethargy and opposition in our city of Richmond, Indiana, where I am. We have started a Yokefellow luncheon for men. Now, I know the importance of women, and so do you. But I think we ought to stress men now. Because many congregations have twice as many females as males in the building. Have you seen a good many of those? We've got to get the men. If you get the men, you are very likely to get the family. So we limit this to men. We have an average attendance at lunch from 12 to 1. We make it very sharp in the discipline of time. We start exactly with prayer at 12 and we end exactly at 1 with prayer, so that men can know that they won't be cheated out of the whole afternoon and a long rigmarole and they can be gone. 2 weeks ago, one man spoke on the ministry of medicine. He is a physician. Yesterday, the head of our Chamber of Commerce gave his witness. And then the questions and comments and prayers that came afterwards were just perfectly wonderful. And it's amazing how much you can do in 1 hour, if you will. Now there's a kind of pattern that could be put all across our country. Think how the luncheon club idea, beginning with the Rotary Club and going on to Kiwanis Club, has been so successful. Practically nobody has had the idea of the Christian luncheon. And you may be the men who could help to inaugurate that in some of the areas under your care. What yoke fellows are doing is to form what virtually is a new order. If you read this chapter from my autobiography, which John has so graciously has printed and which Harper has agreed to, you will see that I begin the chapter with the need of a new order. It came to me vividly that we certainly don't need denominations. We've got plenty of them, perhaps too many. But we need something that will do for us what Benedict did in his century and what St. Francis did in his century. New Benedictines, as it were. It strikes me very vividly to realize that in the very same year that Plato's Academy died, Benedict started his work. And as an old stump seemed to rot, new shoots came up. This is how God works. That's what we mean by the whole spirit of renewal. And so the Yoke Fellow movement is clearly trans-denominational. This morning, of the 140 people at the Yoke Fellow breakfast at Williamsport, I saw representatives of at least a dozen denominations. I saw one whole table of Quakers. I saw many of the disciples, many of the Methodists, many of the Presbyterians, many of the Lutherans. It was just the way it ought to look. And nobody cared for the moment what these denominational connections were all. Everyone there knew that we're in a hard time and that we've got to have new shoots out of the old stump. The present aspect of it came almost incidentally, and certainly without prior intent. In Washington, I spoke one time in the old Supreme Court room at the Capitol to a group of prison chaplains from all over the country. And I told about the power of the small, committed group. I'd never even thought of that in prison. I thought of it in communities like yours. One man was there from Lewisburg Prison, just north of us. And he went back and started a Yoke Fellow group right away in Lewisburg. Another one did the same in the Tacoma, Washington area, and the thing was started without intent. Now it is doing better in Pennsylvania, I believe, than in any other state. To think that we have Yoke Fellow groups in every prison of Pennsylvania is very frightening. I spoke once at Greater Ford, just outside of Philadelphia. Oh, that was a moving experience for me. I had 400 men. Men mostly without hope. And this morning at Williamsburg, I spoke to a man who had been a prisoner, and the reason he came and spoke to me this morning was he heard my preacher preach. See, I can't know which one will catch it. And our meeting ended this morning with a wonderful witness from a fellow named Gene Shore. John got in touch with him at Allenwood Prison. He became a thoroughly committed Christian. He is now in what I consider the hardest mission field of America, that is Atlantic City. Just think what a beautiful place it once was with those magnificent hotels. Most of them, even Haddon Hall, are torn down. Now, untold pornography, untold prostitution, all coming in the wake of the self-seeking spirit of gambling. The antithesis of everything that you and I stand for. And now he's working in a store there, and the store is where the main casino is, the old Chalfont Hotel, which is one of the most beautiful ones in this entire nation. And he has started a weekly Yokefellow group every morning in the gambling den. How's that for being in Caesar's household? He came to me as he left and he said, I want to know that text that you mentioned from 1 Corinthians, because he wants to use it there. 1 Corinthians 16:9, if you've never preached on it. A great and effectual door is open, and there are many adversaries. And you have to say both of those, of course, to tell the truth. Now, in one way, the Yokefellow idea is very clear and simple. We begin with the notion that to be a Christian is to be committed to Christ. This we shall all accept. In Christ's clearest call to commitment, which is in some ways the very heart of the gospel, he says, come to me, take my yoke upon you, and learn of me. There's your program, which every man here is trying in one way or another to implement. I know that you can say and do say to the people under your care, a Christian is not a person going to a shrine. A person is not a member of an audience simply listening to a speech. A Christian is a member of Christ's team. And the beauty of the yoke symbol is that anybody can see that it means teamwork. You cannot be a Christian alone. It is where 16 or so are gathered together that he is. There are times for solitude, of course, but they are the rare times. Christianity is the most social of all religions. You have to find somebody else. And this has been so vivid in regard to the prisoners. Now, this fellow that was there this morning from Atlantic City says quite frankly that unless he could have got a group started, he'd have drifted right back to where he was before. We need one another. And the harder the problem, the more we need one another. This is why you and I believe in the church. I know the church is inadequate, of course it is. And it's made up of very poor people because it's people like me. But without the church, there is no Christianity at all. I hope you'll say over and over that you've got to be yoked with others if you are yoked with Christ. Well, gentlemen, we've got a hold here of a very big thing. We've been talking about this now for a quarter of a century. We are now international. We have many centers, one at Williamsport being one of them. And there is vastly more to be done. This can mean the renewal of individual churches, regardless of denomination. It can make for commitment, fellowship, discipline, and the ministry of every Christian. Those are the 4 points that we stress.
Dr. Trueblood now begins to answer questions from the various executives that are gathered in the cafeteria room, and at one point there are some interferences which are familiar cafeteria sounds, but